Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Cliff Notes for Enlightenment. Today we're going to be covering the classic from the 20th century in a way that is a synthesis of not only Napoleon Hill but Charles Haanel from the Master Key System, William James, public philosopher, uh, thinkers like Joseph Rodrigues, Kegan, Wilber, Whitehead, and Aurobindo. Now, the central premise of Think and Grow Rich can be understood far more deeply than the conventional formula of wanting something, thinking positively behind it, and working hard and eventually acquiring what it is that you desire. At its most developed, the process is not primarily about the acquisition of riches more so than the embodiment of wealth consciousness. A vision tends to arise in consciousness, in imagination, and our attention begins organizing around it, and our imagination can continue to rehearse that vision to where our identity becomes increasingly congruent and resonant with the vision. As we continue to repeat the process, that repetition develops further capabilities, and our experience of that repetition is going to produce specialized knowledge. Planning creates the structures through which those capabilities can operate. Our relationships and environments are going to reinforce particular ways of being, and that feedback loop continually corrects the system. So, what was once consciously imagined becomes increasingly natural, embodied, and more visible. And yet, the deepest reversal comes before the entire process. The person does not need to wait for the external achievement to experience fulfillment. Fulfillment can be recognized as the ground from which these achievements proceed, that you are already that which you desire to be because you have found the path, you found the end of the path as you walk it. The desire to achieve the end goal is real, and the achievement of self-actualization matters, as does the development of capabilities and harmonious relationships and wealth through the process of mastery and embodying creativity, building a family and a culture through leadership of oneself and contribution to material conditions, which all matter within the domains of the infinite fulfillment. But none of those things manufacture being as we are. They give being expression that we can be fulfilled with these things, but we are not fulfilled because of these things. This produces an entirely different interpretation of what it means to achieve. Being does not travel towards fulfillment. Fulfillment differentiates itself through becoming. And from this perspective, books like Think and Grow Rich, The Master Key System, Psycho-Cybernetics, The Direct Path to $1 Million, all these teachings on self-concept and the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and developmental psychology, integral theory, process philosophy, Neville Goddard's teachings on manifestation, and Sri Aurobindo's evolutionary spirituality can be organized into one coherent developmental circuit. The entire system can be understood through these 8 overlapping movements. And so we could start out with ontological reversal. Fulfillment precedes acquisition. The conventional structure of desire is I do not have something, therefore I want it. If I obtain it, then I will experience fulfillment. This makes fulfillment conditional upon circumstance. The person imagines fulfillment sitting somewhere in the future, distant, in separation with one's self. When the money arrives, then they feel as though they will feel prosperous. In a relationship, they will feel loved. In winning a championship, they will be successful. When the house arrives, they will feel secure. When the recognition finally shows up, then they will know that they are significant. And that arrangement produces an unstable psychological relationship with reality because every present circumstance becomes evidence concerning whether fulfillment is approaching or whether it is receding. A successful repetition seems to say you are getting closer, and a failure appears to say perhaps you won't achieve what it is that you desire to achieve. And an individual can become increasingly emotionally governed by the fluctuations in circumstance, whereas the deeper reversal is fulfillment is already available intrinsically as being. And external achievement can express fulfillment, symbolize fulfillment, expand the range through which fulfillment is experienced, or even give fulfillment beautiful and meaningful forms to take it to a level that we hadn't experienced or embodied yet. And that does not necessarily create the fundamental capacity for fulfillment. And this does not diminish ambition. It liberates ambition from the state of desperation. You can desire extraordinary wealth without demanding that wealth tell you whether or not you are whole, or better or worse. You can desire extraordinary relationships without requiring another person to produce your capacity for love. You can pursue mastery without interpreting every mistake along the way as evidence that you are fundamentally inadequate and incapable of the mastery that only comes from putting in a mass amounts of repetitions, both success and failed. When at the US Mint in Philadelphia, they don't teach people how to find a counterfeit bill by showing them counterfeit bills. They teach them how to find a counterfeit bill by showing them so many authentic bills that you know what the real thing to look for is. And so you can build, you can compete, you can learn, create, lead, and expand from fullness rather than attempting to repair an ontological deficiency of acceptance of what is happening. That is the first reversal from going from poverty consciousness into embodying wealth consciousness. The vision is not responsible for completing your being. The vision is a form through which being can express itself and further encourage deeper fulfillment. The second point I'd like to get into is that desire reveals direction. Once fulfillment is no longer placed entirely at the end of the process, desire changes meaning. Desire no longer automatically means that something is missing. Desire can instead function as information. Desire may reveal a form of life that consciousness presently finds meaningful or attractive and magnetic, beautiful, challenging, or just worthy of embodiment. And this does not mean that every desire is sacred or every impulse should be followed and acted upon. Desires can emerge from insecurity. They can arise from social comparison. Desire can be addictive. It can be compensatory. It can be an expression of trauma or fear or status, anxiety, or any unconscious conditioning. Development requires discrimination, but once a desire has been examined across time and remains coherent with one's deeper values, it may be treated as directional information. You can recognize that there is something about that form of life that resonates with me. The desire for leadership may reveal a desire to organize complexity. The desire for prosperity may reveal a desire to embody greater freedom, creation, stewardship, or range of action. Desire for scholarship and education may reveal a love of understanding. The desire for family may reveal a wish to participate in intimacy, devotion, continuity, and care for those bonds. You can desire athletic mastery to reveal a wish to explore the outer limits of your embodied capability. Instead of condemning desire or worshiping it and repressing desire or suppressing desire or thinking yourself better than others for your ability to embody your desire, you can investigate it in asking, what is this desire actually pointing toward in the story that I tell myself about myself in the world that I reside in? The object may be one expression of something deeper, and that deeper desire can then become vision. Now, the wish fulfilled is naturalness. So, embodying of the feeling of the wish fulfilled is knowing that because you are the kind of person that is capable of achieving your goals and your vision, that it is going to happen. And the feeling of the wish fulfilled is not ecstasy, it is more normalcy. And it can throw people off, thinking that if you're not continuously happy and excited and grateful and certain and euphoric, then somehow you've fallen out of the state of the wish fulfilled. But a fulfilled life contains ordinary weather patterns. You could still experience fear, frustration, uncertainty, desire, impatience, fatigue, disappointment, and anticipation, anger, or temporary doubt. One of my favorite stories is from my friend who sells cards and comics and sports memorabilia. He sold a old baseball ticket and he wasn't able to locate it. So he figured he would go and tape up some other boxes that he needed to tape up anyway, so that way he could mail them out. And as he's using his tape gun, the tape gun gets all jammed up, and now he can't find the ticket. He's trying to tape up the boxes, and his tape gun's jammed up, so he just takes the tape and just throws the whole roll in the trash. and he knows that he has a new bundle of tape somewhere around, and he starts looking around and he finds the new rolls of tape, and right underneath of the rolls of tape is the baseball ticket that he's been looking for. Sometimes these feeling states of fear and frustration and uncertainty and impatience and anger and temporary doubt are built into the bridge of incidents as the path of least resistance. And that is completely natural. The desired reality becomes something that you increasingly recognize as coherent with that which you are. A championship quarterback does not need to experience the euphoria every time that he enters a meeting room to know that football belongs within his life. That is his purpose. Super Bowl winning quarterback and Super Bowl MVP Jalen Hurts talked about before he won the Super Bowl, what was going through his mind was all of the work and all of the preparation that he remained present in day after day to know that in the biggest moments he had prepared properly for who he is already, and he knew that he was that caliber of person, and because he already embodied that person, the outcomes magnetized to him naturally. An accomplished entrepreneur doesn't need to feel wealthy every second of the day to recognize the way that business creation is his natural territory, being as he is in his own way, which is the best way, and being as you are in your way is also the best way. A scholar or someone in education doesn't need to feel intellectually brilliant every morning to know that by sustaining that inquiry, you can simply be a part of how you live. And the wish fulfilled becomes knowing that this belongs within the life that I recognize as mine. And at a deeper level, whether this circumstance appears today or later doesn't determine whether being itself is fulfilled. This permits a sense of desire without separation. So you may intensely want the visible form while no longer requiring the form to establish your self-worth or completeness. And with the vision stable, the route can remain unknown. That you don't need to worry about exactly how these things are going to show up because the ways are beyond your knowing. This naturally produces a distinction between the vision of what you want and the mechanism of how you're going to achieve it. You can possess deep confidence in the vision while possessing incomplete knowledge of the unfoldment of the bridge of incidents. Joseph Rodrigues has a formulation for self confidence. It's not necessarily, I know this will happen in the unfolding. It can be, I have sufficient conviction in what I recognize inwardly that I am willing to persist before knowing precisely how it's going to become embodied. And you can use your five sensory intake in order to build your confidence in this, as well as you can use your sixth sense and intuition and your persistence in the unseen in order to build that sense of confidence. And that sense of confidence is not an emotion, which is a huge misconception that I find. Confidence is a statistical probability that if I gave you a task to complete and I told you that there's about a 70% chance that you fail, you might think that you're going to go into that task with low confidence. But when applying that to baseball, the best in the game who can hit a baseball going about 100 miles an hour, about like 3 out of 10 times, you're one of the greatest to ever do it. And then when you calibrate your expectations with a level of certainty that you know when your successes are going to come, when your failures are going to come, and you put more faith in the attempt than you put the faith in the success, that distinction becomes essential to your success. The vision can remain firm while the route changes repeatedly. And so the method is not the self. Business model is not the self. The individual sales call is not the self. The batting attempt is not the self. The particular relationship isn't the totality of the infinite expression of love. The present coach is not the entire path to mastery. The first plan does not possess sacred status simply because it was the first plan. So hold the vision firmly, but hold the route lightly. This is the bridge from ontological recognition and recognition into psychological programming. Because once you know what you are participating toward, the next question becomes, how does that vision begin organizing the internal system? Which leads us into programming the self. The self image becomes the set point. In Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz, this adds a crucial piece to Napoleon Hill's achievement philosophy. A human being does not merely possess conscious goals. The person has a self image. That image acts like a psychological set point. And you can consciously say, I want to become successful. But if the deeper self image says that I'm not capable of currently being successful, the behavior is likely to organize and reorganize around the more deeply embedded identity. So that's going to cause procrastination and avoiding opportunities and misinterpreting neutral events as rejection, quitting early, distracting oneself, uh, overcomplicating the simple steps and the simple actions, choosing environments that are going to reinforce the old identity. The behavior appears irrational only if we observe what the stated end goal and vision are. The perspective of the self image. There's a system that may be behaving completely coherently in identity protection, which is why the self concept matters so profoundly. A sufficiently stable identity changes the range of behaviors that feel natural. So instead of continually asking, what should I do? A person will increasingly act from, what does someone like me do? And the self image, therefore, creates a reference point around which thought, behavior, expectation, and interpretation organize. Our attention selects what matters. Charles Haanel and William James both help deepen this process. Consciousness cannot attend equally to everything. attention selects and collects based off of what we find to be most valuable to our self concept. The world contains so much data and information, but only some of it is going to become salient. Once vision and identity become clear, then perception starts reorganizing around that goal and that data. So you suddenly start to notice the book, the opportunity, the right mentor, the competitors that are worth studying, the insufficiencies in your process, the repeated patterns, the skill gaps in where you need to rise your capabilities and where the openings are, the mistakes that you've previously made and how to build upon them. You become the person who knows something that you need. You notice the environment that is holding you back and the things begin to change. This doesn't happen in a force-based way necessarily. If you want to make it happen in a effort-based, force-based way, no shame or condemnation. But all of these things will just change as life itself naturally. And these possibilities that had always been present start to make themselves more visible as a part of your vision that you didn't realize until then. The environment doesn't necessarily have to change dramatically, but the observer is what changes meaningfully. And it appearing in a flow-based way effortlessly also does not require assuming that manifestation and thought magically created every event. Changing attention alone can radically change your lived reality because you now recognize different information and you interpret the information in a way that's now different. Vision, therefore, functions partly as an attention filter. What matters? What deserves energy? What can be ignored? What is to be studied? What patterns keep repeating? What signals indicate movement? What signals indicate that the present strategy needs to be revised? The clearer that one's identity becomes, the clearer that the organized attention is going to become. And one of the chapters of Think and Grow Rich that I cover the most is the chapter on autosuggestion, which conditions our identity. Now, Napoleon Hill's autosuggestion is often reduced to verbal affirmations, but autosuggestion is much larger than just sentences that are spoken aloud and repeated. You're constantly suggesting something about yourself in the way that you speak, the actions that you take, the thoughts that you think, uh, like in the Eightfold Path in Buddhism. Uh, every interpretation that you have about the data is autosuggestion. Every repeated internal story is an autosuggestion. Every environment that you reside in makes suggestions. Every group that you're around has assumptions about reality. Every routine communicates identity. Every time that you behave in accordance with a particular self concept, you cast another vote for that self concept and identity. And the subconscious mind is going to receive repeated messages from language and imagery, your behaviors, emotion, your environment, relationships, repetitions of success, failure, how you recover from them, what your habits are, and your expectations of the vision. Autosuggestion works best when all of these dimensions converge. You can say, I am disciplined, while repeatedly behaving in a chaotic fashion, which generates conflicting information. Saying I am capable while continually avoiding the situations which capability could actually be tested gives the subconscious little evidence of capability. The strongest dose of suggestion is not just verbal, it is lived repetition. You tell yourself who you are, you imagine who you are, you behave as that person, you enter environments in which that behavior becomes normal. You interpret temporary failure without abandoning the identity. And over time, the suggestion becomes increasingly natural. And our imagination is going to rehearse those patterns. Imagination allows the nervous system to begin rehearsing reality before the external conditions arise. A person can rehearse the conversation going harmoniously, the presentation going harmoniously, the competition going the way that they want it to go, the decisions that they make being in alignment with their ideal identity, uh, showing up in the way that their self concept would in a moment that is difficult or challenging. They can imagine the desired lifestyle that they wish to live, the emotional responses that they wish to take, being more highly conscious, how they wish to execute and carry themselves in response to adversity. And this matters because the unfamiliarity itself and how we react to the fear of the unknown can create resistance. And repeated imaginal acts can make a possibility psychologically familiar. Something that once seemed foreign or alien begins to feel increasingly available. But imagination is most powerful when it's understood properly. It is not a replacement for reality, it is preparation for contact with reality. The imagined defender behaves according to your current model. The real defender possesses independent agency. The imagined prospect says what you expect them to say. The real prospect might completely surprise you in how they approach their objections. The imagined organization behaves rationally, but real organization contains politics and individualized incentives, culture, history, and conflicting interests. And thus, the imagination establishes your internal pattern, and embodied experience tests and refines it, which brings us to the next movement of how does consciously programmed identity become competent? The answer through cybernetic learning. Now, the repetition itself is success. One of the most destructive assumptions across achievement culture is that repetition only matters if it produced the preferred immediate result. The call made, the sale closed, success. The call is made, the prospect objects and declines, it's a failure. If the pass is completed, it's a success. If the pass is incomplete, it's a failure. Business experiment grows revenue and it's a success. If the business experiment fails, then failure. Then this becomes too crude as there are multiple levels of success. The first is execution success. Did you perform the repetition? And then the second is learning success. Did the repetition produce enough information, pattern recognition, emotional tolerance, or improved capability? And the third is outcome success. Did the immediate environment produce the preferred result? These can diverge. You can fail at outcome while succeeding at execution and learning. That means the repetition itself can remain successful even when the external event does not produce the preferred result. The call was made. The conversion and the conversation reveals an objection. You recognize your explanation was unclear. Your next conversation is going to be different. The failed repetition has already altered your interpretation of the data. Therefore, 100 attempts are not the first attempt repeated 100 times. If learning occurs, each repetition is performed by a progressively different system. Persistence does not merely increase opportunities, persistence transforms you, the participant, and failure is going to supply error information. Failure is not necessarily a negative. Maxwell Maltz's cybernetic metaphor becomes especially useful in this regard, that a goal-directed system requires feedback, right? If you have a desired state as X and what you're observing is Y, the difference is information. The system is going to correct itself. And this means error is not necessarily evidence that the goal seeking has failed. The error is often the part of goal seeking. The mistake is occurring when behavioral error is converted into identity judgment, shame, and condemnation. When a sales strategy fails, instead of the strategy needs adjustment, the person can conclude, I'm not capable of operating this business. When a play fails, instead of I misread the rotation of the safeties, a quarterback can conclude I'm not talented enough to play football. A relationship can become difficult and challenging, and instead of there's a communication problem, a person can conclude I am unlovable. The cybernetic framework interrupts that escalation. The desired result, the observed result, the difference between them, the diagnosis of what needs to occur, the adjustment of what will occur, and then repeating the process. Failure belongs primarily to the model. The model can be updated. Being does not need to be condemned. Perfection, as one of my favorite coaches, Jay Clark, says, perfection is something that we ask for. It is not something that we require. And embodying repetitions allows us to calibrate our imagination. That clarification of the imaginal and embodied repetitions. That imaginal reps can be enormously powerful. They allow the system to rehearse the sequence, the timing, the attention, the expectation, emotional regulation, decision pathways, and identity. But embodied repetitions contribute something imagination cannot fully generate, which is independent resistance. Reality has its own structure. Other people have agency. Uh, your body can become fatigued. Markets can respond unpredictably. Defense can disguise their intentions. Institutions contain incentives which you don't initially anticipate. Embodied repetition, therefore, supplies calibration. So the optimal loop becomes imagine the way that it's going to go, execute the way that you wish to execute, then observe the way that you imagined and executed, update your process, imagine again, execute again, and complete that recursive loop. Imagination becomes progressively more sophisticated because it is no longer operating purely from fantasy, because you have the lived reps to embody it and further develop your self concept. Likewise, embodied action becomes more sophisticated because imagination allows improved rehearsal before the next encounter. The two forms of repetition wind up reinforcing one another. That your imaginal reps build into your embodied reps, and then your embodied reps make it easier to imagine how your next reps are going to go. Your experience becomes specialized knowledge. This is what Napoleon Hill is covering in specialized knowledge understood dynamically. Specialized knowledge is not just the accumulation of facts, it is the increasing ability to make distinctions that matter within a particular domain. A novice or a layman is going to see a play that failed, while an expert is going to see that in football the protection was wrong, or the leverage was wrong, the route depth was wrong, the timing from the quarterback was wrong, the way that the defensive coverage rotated, the quarterback making the wrong post snap confirmation, or the defense just simply winning an individual rep. Uh, a beginner in sales sees that the prospect said no, whereas the expert is going to see the qualification failure. How did that person get into the funnel in the first place? The positioning failure. What did they expect when they came on the call, and how did I not deliver on that regard? When we were talking with one another, did I not fully hear out what their problem is and be able to trust that I could secure the sale because of my ability to solve their problem for them? When it comes down to a money issue or a budget mismatch, in what way am I not properly showcasing the value of what I'm delivering and the opportunity cost to the value proposition? Is it poor discovery, or is it just the appropriate no? Experience creates finer distinctions. Finer distinctions improve our decisions. Improved decisions are going to impact our actions, and thus we have our repetitions, experience, distinction, creating specialized knowledge, which allows for better repetitions. Eventually, faith begins acquiring operational evidence, and that produces a more mature form of confidence. Now, we have confidence through our capability. Faith acts before complete evidence. There is a period in almost every meaningful pursuit which conviction must precede proof. You cannot possess years of evidence for life that you haven't lived. You cannot provide proof that you will become excellent before performing the reps through which excellence is created. This is where faith becomes necessary. Faith is not necessarily certainty about every event. Faith can simply be sufficient conviction to take action where the evidence remains incomplete. You trust the direction enough to continue, which is why I really appreciate Joseph Rodrigues's description of self-confidence. Self-confidence can mean I possess faith in the vision enough to persist without knowing the entirety of how everything is going to work out. Now, this does not require irrational certainty about the strategic, you know, elements that are currently held. You can simultaneously hold, I know what I'm committed to embodying, and I do not yet know whether this method will work. That is a mature outlook on faith. And mastery builds your self efficacy. Albert Binder's concept of self efficacy gives empirical structure to what happens next. A person takes action and they discover that they can perform something that they previously could not do. A new internal expectation emerges. So the first sales conversation is absolutely terrifying. The 15th is familiar. The first sparring session is chaotic. Years later, the person is receiving the positions of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu or MMA automatically, subconsciously, second nature. The first public presentation produces overwhelming just emotion. And eventually, the person can speak before thousands of people while remaining regulated. This is mastery information. The nervous system now possesses evidence. The person no longer merely is affirming their capability, they've experienced how capable they are. That creates a powerful feedback loop. Your faith permits you to act, your action produces experience of mastery. Mastery increases your self efficacy. Your self efficacy is going to increase your willingness to further take action. And additional action is going to develop additional capability. Faith and evidence stop being opposites. Your faith initiates the process before you have sufficient evidence, and experience gradually grounds the faith. Your competence is going to ground your confidence. This requires distinguishing several forms of confidence. There is ontological confidence, uh, knowing what is happening, that my basic intrinsic being is not created or destroyed by this outcome. There is vision confidence. I remain deeply committed to this direction. There is strategic confidence. I have evidence that this particular approach is likely to work. You have self efficacy. I have evidence that I can competently perform the required actions. And then there is outcome probability. Given what I already know, how likely is this particular attempt to succeed? These should not be confused with one another, as they can all be labeled as confidence. You can possess high vision confidence while acknowledging how low outcome probability is on a particular repetition. Perhaps an individual prospect only has a 10% probability of buying. If they decline, nothing metaphysically catastrophic happened. A 90% event just occurred. You learn, you continue, and true confidence becomes more stable because it no longer requires pretending that uncertainty does not exist. Your persistence is going to transform you, and you will be transformed by the renewing of your mind. This is why persistence matters far beyond uh, the traditional concept of being stubborn. Persistence compounds one's development. The person who begins the journey is not the person who performs the thousandth rep. They say a man never crosses the same river twice because the river changes and the man changes, having acquired the knowledge and the experience and the relationships and the tolerance for uncertainty and the ability to emotionally regulate and building your technical capability, your pattern recognition development, your ability to make judgments, recover faster, have better filters as to what is real and what isn't, and build more accurate internal modeling. Persistence, therefore, changes the probability structure of future outcomes because it changes the actor who is generating those outcomes. This is perhaps one of the most powerful principles in the entire system. You don't merely persist until reality changes. You persist until participation has changed you sufficiently that different realities become increasingly probable and producible. At this point, confidence must leave the purely internal domain. It must become organized participation. Coming over to that intelligent participation that we just talked about, you can hold the vision tightly and hold the route and the means of which you're going to arrive at that vision lightly. Once the vision is accepted, there is still the danger of becoming attached to one mechanism. The person in mind can mistake the first plan for the vision itself, and then every deviation from that initial plan feels threatening. But the plans are hypotheses. The vision can still remain while the method can change completely. You can change the industry, you can change your offer, you can change your coach, your city, the team that you play for, the technology that you use, switch up the business model, change the way that you schedule your life, tactics that you take in going about achieving your vision, the partnerships and relationship that you build, or the sequence at which you had assumed that you were going to go through the order in achieving these things without necessarily betraying the deeper direction that you have for your life. And this is why we should hold the vision tightly and hold the route that we get there lightly. The vision is going to organize the action, and the route is going to remain responsive to reality. So we can plan locally and adapt globally. Organized planning does not mean knowing the entire bridge of incidents. It means creating sufficient enough structure to intelligently execute what can presently be known. The question is not, can I map every event between here and the final vision? A better question to ask is, given what I currently know, what is the highest quality next action? And then execute and observe and update your model and continue. This becomes an elegant synthesis between manifestation and systems thinking. You're neither passively waiting, wanting, needing, craving circumstances, nor compulsively attempting to control every variable. You participate in the unfolding. You make the best locally available move while preserving global direction. Planning becomes iterative. It lives. Decision stabilizes direction. Decision reduces unnecessary internal negotiation. Before a genuine decision, energy remains distributed across competing futures and probabilities. Maybe I will, maybe I will not. Maybe later, maybe something easier is going to appear. And after the decision's made, the question changes. Given that this is now the direction, what does intelligent participation require of me? This does not mean refusing to consider or reconsider immature goals. A developed person can revise a vision when deeper understanding reveals a better path. But mature decision prevents momentary discomfort from constantly reopening settled commitments. Strategy remains flexible. Direction becomes stable. That greatly increases the amount of energy available for execution. And that sense of variance does not redefine our self concept. Persistence then becomes an ability to tolerate the variance in the bridge of incidents. A good process can produce bad outcomes. A bad process can occasionally produce good outcomes. Only one repetition contains limited information. The immature mind can overinterpret each individual event. Success can say everything is working, failure can say everything is collapsing. And this is pendulum consciousness, as talked about by Vadim Zeland in Reality Transurfing. The person is continually thrown between emotional poles because every external event is given a locus of control and authority to redefine your identity. Higher self confidence allows the event to remain appropriately scaled. The event matters, and the feedback matters, and the lesson matters, but the event does not become the totality of self as infinite love, happiness, peace, bliss, joy, prosperity, and fulfillment. You remain responsive without becoming psychologically captured by every fluctuation. Once intelligent participation is established, the next question is, what larger field is training and reinforcing the identity that brings us to the social and energetic ecology? The mastermind is going to normalize our identity. Napoleon Hill talks about the power of the mastermind principle, and it is much more interesting than networking alone. It is identity architecture. Human beings are continuously shaped by their social environment. Every group communicates what is normal, what is admirable, what is embarrassing, what is possible, what are the expectations, what counts as excellence, what counts as excessive, what is really deserving of our attention, how failure should be interpreted. Around one group, sustained study appears obsessive. Around another, it is ordinary. Around one group, financial sophistication is inaccessible, and in another, capital allocation is routine conversation. Around one group, elite athletic preparation appears excessive. Inside a championship organization, it is simply the standard. The mastermind is going to change the reference class, and extraordinary becomes the normal, and familiarity makes embodiment easier because you're around people who continually set that same standard with you. And these relationships wind up expanding the possibilities. Other people don't just reinforce our identity as we continue to identify as part of the in group, they contain information and capability that the isolated individual simply just does not possess. A genuine mastermind program can provide knowledge, criticism, opportunity, capital, introductions, emotional support, technical capabilities and expertise, cultural knowledge, strategic perspective, and access to environments that cannot be entered alone. This is why complex achievement is very rarely purely individual. The fantasy of the isolated genius who ignores the relational infrastructure behind almost every significant accomplishment, the quarterback who, despite not having a great offensive line or good wide receivers who is fighting for everything that he has running around all the time is mythologized, whereas human development is distributed across relationships. The right relationships are going to therefore expand the possibility space. They don't just help out in executing an existing plan, they expose possibilities where the original plan could not contain it. And that thought energy is directed into creation. The chapter on sexual transmutation can be interpreted within this wider energetic ecology. Humans contain powerful affective energies of sexual desire, love, ambition, longing, devotion, attraction, competitive intensity, creative excitement, and all all kinds of just wonderful emotions that we go through life. The question is not whether these energies should exist, but the question is whether we can consciously direct them toward the fulfillment of our desired outcomes and reality. Unregulated energy becomes compulsion. Integrated energy is powerful. Sexual energy can be creativity. Love can become devotion and service. Longing can become art. Competitive energy can become disciplined training. Uh, Ambition can become building of an institution. The goal is not repression, it is increasingly conscious direction of the energy. The person becomes capable of containing stronger energies without automatically becoming commanded by them. And the environment makes embodiment of the vision easier. This applies equally to physical environments as well as systemic environments across the Ken Wilber AQUAL model, that both your internal environment of your mind and your external environment, as well as the environment around you as an individual and the pluralistic environment of the beliefs in society, so on and so forth. Willpower is expressive. Our environment can reduce the amount of willpower that is required. If you want to study, you should build an environment in which studying is easy. If you want to train at a high level, you should place yourself inside a culture where high level training is normalized. If you want to create, remove friction between an idea and the execution. If you want excellent decisions, build information systems that make relevant data visible. If you want a particular identity to become natural, arrange surroundings that continually reinforce it. The environment includes people, cities, institutions, technology, your calendar, scheduling, the capital that you have access to, physical space, your routines, information systems, organizational structures, incentives, and culture. Now, once behavior and environment reinforce one another and operate harmoniously, the identity begins acquiring structural support and deeper resonance. But even this is not the end. At higher developmental models, the person begins recognizing that the self, environment, and world are not independent pieces. They are participating in a larger process. All in all, that there is no separation within this process, development, and integration. The mind, body, world all enact the bridge of incidence. Francisco Varela and the inactive tradition provide a powerful correction to simplistic manifestation models that reality is not merely an external screen onto which an isolated mind projects. The organism and environment continually participate in one another. You perceive, you act, the environment responds. The response is going to change your information. New information changes your perception of that information. Different perception is going to change your actions, and the different actions are going to alter the environment again. The bridge of incidence is therefore not necessarily a fully constructed road waiting on, you to walk somewhere in the universe. It can emerge through participation. You make one call, that conversation introduces a person, that person is exposed to an idea. The idea is going to change the business. The changed business places you in another environment. That environment produces another relationship. None of those later steps were visible when you began. The bridge became increasingly available through enactment. And thus, the action does not merely move you across the bridge, the action helps reveal which of the bridges of incident are most possible. And your identity then becomes an object and not a prison. Robert Kegan's developmental work adds another layer to this, as early in development, we're often subject to our identities. We do not merely possess them, they possess us. I am my political identity. I am my profession. I am my social role. I am my sports fandom. I am my worldview. I am my religion. I am my self concept. Development gradually allows what was previously subject to become object. You can observe the identity, you can use it, you can revise it, you can transcend it. This is critical because self-development systems can accidentally create stronger prisons. The person replaces I am powerless with I am powerful, but remains equally identified with the conceptual self. And the deeper movement is I can intentionally construct a powerful identity without mistaking that identity for the totality of being. You can embody the founder, the athlete, the scholar, the leader, the parent, the creator, and still recognize all of these forms within awareness that when you say, I am these things, you're not describing separate things, you're describing separate functions as the same self that you are, and you can increasingly identify with pluralistic ways of considering the self concept. Identity becomes more of an instrument of expression rather than a rigid prison as to how you should be or are supposed to be as societally constructed ideas of yourself. And these integral perspectives can stay differentiated. Ken Wilber's integral framework provides another safeguard to this, as no single perspective is going to explain the entirety of the process. Uh, Inner consciousness matters, behavior matters, culture matters, systems matter. The developmental altitude at which you are currently resonating at matters. The states of consciousness matter. Other people's perspectives matter. Material constraints matter. A complete model, therefore, refuses reductionism. You cannot solve every problem by thinking differently. Some problems require certain skills, some require money, social change, complete institutional redesign. Some require therapy, some require training, some require changing environments, and some require the accepting of conditions that cannot presently be changed. Second tier thinking becomes especially valuable because it can include multiple explanatory layers without demanding that one layer is superior to or destroying the others. Psychology can be true within its domain, and spirituality can be meaningful within another. Systems theory can explain structural forces, economics explains incentives, and neuroscience explains different mechanisms. And phenomenology, the study of phenomenon, can describe lived experience. And these perspectives don't need to become identical to be mutually informative. Integral development, therefore, allows increasingly complex coherence. Wholeness becomes a process that you just embody the process of becoming through life. Whitehead and Aurobindo carry this beyond normal developmental psychology. If fulfillment is already present, then does that mean nothing needs to happen? No. Wholeness does not have to mean static finality or passivity. A living organism can be whole while it's still developing. A symphony can be complete in identity while unfolding through time. A person can possess intrinsic worth while still becoming vastly more capable. Whitehead's process orientation allows being to be understood through the process of becoming. And then Sri Aurobindo adds the possibility that spiritual realization need not culminate in withdrawal from life. Consciousness can increasingly transform life through thought, body, relationships, work, leadership, creation, material organization. The point is not merely to escape the world through transcendence, nor is it merely to strengthen the ego until it acquires everything that it wants. The movement is more integral. Recognize deeper being and allow life to become an increasingly adequate expression of it. At this altitude, the entire achievement process becomes a spiritual catalyst, which brings us to the final synthesis of being, becoming, and being. The fulfillment is the ground. Everything begins here. Before the business, before the relationships, before the championships, before the titles, before the money, before the identity, before the vision, there is the immediate fact of being. I am. The deepest realization is that fulfillment does not need to be manufactured by circumstance before it can be experienced. This creates the freedom from which that all genuine achievement can proceed. You can desire without becoming fundamentally deficient. You can strive without self-rejection. You can compete without requiring victory to prove that you exist correctly. You can lose without losing your self-worth. You can succeed without needing success to manufacture self-worth, and use this intrinsic fulfillment as grounding. That coherence becomes embodiment. And from that ground, desire reveals the direction. You know that which you are and that which you want, you already have it because you have found it through desire. Vision gives direction a form. Your identity gives the form something to center around. Attention selects information coherent with that identity. Autosuggestion is going to reinforce it. Imagination rehearses it. Repetition then develops capability, and error creates a feedback loop. Feedback produces specialized knowledge of knowing what specifically the nuance points of what makes success success, what makes failure failure, and everything in between to mastery. And mastery creates that self-efficacy. Planning becomes a way to create structure. Decision is going to stabilize that direction. Persistence allows development across time, and the mastermind creates relational reinforcement. Energy becomes directed. Environment becomes supportive. Habit creates naturalness. And eventually, what began as conscious imagination becomes increasingly more so embodied. This is manifestation understood as coherence of self concept. The internal possibility becomes progressively congruent with the total life system. Now, achievement gives form, not worth. Then the visible achievement arise. The business exists, the championship is won, the relationship becomes embodied, the money starts to accumulate, the book is written, the organization is built, the capability is real. These are not illusions, they matter. They represent genuine connection and creation. But the achievement did not travel backward in time and manufacture the worth of the person who began the journey. Uh, Steve Jobs said in his 2005 Stanford commencement speech that you can only connect the dots looking backwards. It gives fulfillment form. The experience expands. The person develops. New possibilities become available. Reality changes. But being was not absent through the process occurring prior to the change on the Bridge of Incidents. This allows achievement to be enjoyed without being worshipped. You can fully receive success while knowing that success is expression rather than salvation. And the point of knowing that which you are, that I am presence of awareness. Eventually, the entire journey collapses back into its simplest recognition. I was present when the desire appeared. I was present when the vision was clear. I was present when I imagined it. I remained present with myself when I was doubtful. I was present when I acted. I was present when I failed. I was present when I learned. I was present when I persisted in the vision. I was present when the relationships began to appear. I was present when capability increased. I was present when the environment changed. I was present when the vision became visible and fulfilled. The identities changed, the beliefs changed, the capabilities changed, the relationships changed, the environments changed, the circumstances changed, and the body changed, and the knowledge changed, and the goals themselves along the way may have changed, but throughout the unfolding, there remained the underlying fact I am. I am present. And that is the ultimate summary of Think and Grow Rich, my cliff notes for enlightenment. Not imagine hard enough and reality must obey you, or, if you work hard enough, then you'll finally deserve fulfillment, not detach from the external world because material existence is meaningless, but truly uh, recognize fulfillment as the ground of being. Allow desire to reveal the direction that you're supposed to take. Give desire the form of vision. Adopt a identity that's coherent with that vision. Direct attention and imagination until the pattern becomes psychologically familiar. And you can put that pattern into contact with reality and treat repetition in itself as success and failure as just further feedback and information. Turn experience into specialized knowledge and specialized knowledge into further capability. You allow your capability to create grounded confidence, plan intelligently without worshiping the plan, and decide without becoming rigid, persist without allowing variance to redefine the self in those doubtful moments where you can now build relationships and develop a pluralistic culture and environments which reinforce the desired embodiment. Direct, powerful, emotional, and creative energies into constructive expression. You can participate with reality, co creating rather than attempting to dominate it or be dominated by it in passivity. Let the world correct you. Let development transform the identity doing the pursuing. Integrate the psychological, behavioral, cultural, systemic, developmental, and spiritual perspectives without collapsing them into one another. Allow realization to express itself through ordinary life. Receive achievement fully without asking achievement to create that being that was present from the beginning. And the movement goes, you're being as you are, wholly fulfilled. And from that fulfillment, you have a vision. You have your identity, which you organize that vision around. You provide valuable attention to it and begin to imagine what it is that you wish to embody. And you embody that repetitively and get the feedback and the knowledge and understanding that you're developing your capability, which gives you confidence in further planning on your journey and persisting in the process, building relationships with like-minded people that are going to further the culture and build the environment contributing to your success, embodying that and developing until you transcend the process into knowing the being that you are and continuing to fulfill that recursively and transcending and including all of these previous processes into a deeper development in the next vision. And the point is not to travel from incompleteness to completeness. The point is to recognize completeness, consciously participate in becoming who you will, and discover increasingly sophisticated forms through which that completeness can express itself. The vision is real, the bridge of incidents is real, the work is real, the failure is real, the development is real, and the achievement is real. But fulfillment is not waiting at the other end. Fulfillment is what has been living the journey. Being becomes. Becoming reveals being. To know over all things. I am. Thank you very much for watching today's video. I spent a good amount of time planning and recording it and editing it. I am a coach and consultant, and if you would like me to work with you one-on-one and go over some of these complexities in your own life in terms of philosophy, psychology, business relations, world religion, I have a link to my website in the comments. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe. And until we meet again, much love. Take care.